yield back, and I will recognize the ranking member, Mr. Ivey, for his second round, 5 minutes question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to do a little housekeeping here. I've got a couple of pieces to offer for the record. I ask unanimous consent to offer these statements from the Brookings Institution, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism.
Without objection, so ordered.
I'd ask to offer this joint intelligence bulletin. This is some domestic violence extremists adopt boogaloo and accelerationism concepts to justify or promote violence.
Without exception, so ordered.
And Ms. Spitalnik, I don't know if you're familiar with the boogaloo and accelerationism concepts. They were new to me, but I was wondering if you could expound on those a little bit and talk about how they're connected to these issues.
Absolutely. Look, the Boogaloo Boy movement, which became more prominent in the public discourse in 2020, is a deeply anti-law enforcement, anti-government, right-wing extremist movement, and it specifically came to prominence in summer of 2020 when there were some extremists affiliated with the Boogaloo movement who murdered 2 California law enforcement officers. And this movement specifically believes in the idea of inciting a civil war. Some of them identify as white supremacists, some of them don't, but they are all part of this broader right-wing anti-government extremist movement. And I think it's indicative of the broader anti-law enforcement sentiment that exists among many right-wing extremists. All you need to do is look at what happened here on January 6th to understand that the law enforcement's injured and some who ultimately died from those injuries that day weren't accidental, they weren't collateral damage. They were considered a target by many of the insurrectionists on January 6th. And so it's important to be very clear-eyed about the anti-law enforcement sentiment that exists among many of these right-wing extremists.
All right, and then I wanted to, I've got another article here that it's called Alleged Leaker Fixated on Guns and Envisioned Race Wars. This is an article from the Washington Post dated May 14th. I'd like to offer this for the record as well.
Without objection.
The point I wanted to make on this one, because I didn't know this was there, this is about Jack, I think it's pronounced Teixeira, who was the individual who worked in national security, stole documents and then leaked them to the public. Apparently what motivated him was, I'll just read a little bit here. Jack Teixeira dressed in camouflage fatigues, his finger wrapped around the trigger of a semi-automatic rifle, faced the camera and spoke as though reciting an oath, quote, Jews scam, N-word, rape, and mag dump. Then he used his weapon, aimed at an unseen target and fired it 10 times, emptying the magazine. And the article goes on to talk about his interactions with the group of young men that he shared these documents with preliminarily. He wasn't apparently planning to release them to the public, but he did release them to these friends, and they got out eventually. And then a little later in the article, it talks about his comments about the Black Lives Matter protests. He told his friends he saw a storm gathering. One friend said he was afraid they would target white people. He had told me quite a few times he thought they need to be prepared for a revolution. So I guess there's a commonality here. It actually traces all the way back to McVeigh and beyond about sort of an apocalyptic vision about what's going to happen with the United States, the Second Civil War and the like. That sort of leads to these kinds of dangerous responses. Teixeira didn't actually kill anybody, but many of the people that we're talking about today did. And it seems to me that that is an important line of distinction to draw, and we're trying to separate out these issues. But at the end of the day, and as I said at our last hearing, Mr. Chairman, I think there's a good hearing in here somewhere with respect to how the Homeland Security Committee can address these types of problems, move forward. Mr. Erickson, you raised concerns about the government issuing information and responding to false information, misinformation. That's fine. I have a different view on some of these, but I think there is a point where, especially if it's drawing a distinction about who's politically right or making those kinds of evaluations, I do think there are definitely scenarios where the government can and should be issuing information, especially where it creates I'll say, a clear and present present danger with respect to the community. And I do share your view that it should be addressed consistently, and by that I mean violence, especially murder, I think should be, prosecuted as such. I think, vandalism and other types of crimes should be prosecuted as such. I think the point of the testimony I've heard so far today and the data we presented was there's a clear distinction between the right-wing extremism violence, which has been, in many instances, results in homicides, sometimes targeting police. And I think what you all have said with respect to Antifa and the like, that it tends to be vandalism, theft, I think there's some arson and property crimes, but different. But at the end of the day, I think we need to address both. So with that, I yield back.
I thank the ranking member for the ecumenical sort of conclusion there. I appreciate that. I think the gentleman's style is one that I appreciate. And with that, I yield for I recognize Ms. Green for 5 minutes of questioning, second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just while we've been sitting